Hearing none, then all those in favor of approval?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Bruce abstaining. Do we need to go to the folks on Zoom, Sylvia, or are we just voting in the room?
We can, let's see, who do we have? We just need Tim. If Tim would give a thumbs up, that'd be great. We lost Tim. What happened? Tim, yay on the minutes? Tim, yeah, thank you. And then Linda Dusenberry. And, okay, maybe she stepped away.
So moving on to new business, Nate with tip amendment number 3.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to pull up a brief presentation here on tip amendment number 3. Actually, I need to share my screen. Let's see. Can everyone on Zoom see this presentation?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I am going to, over the next few minutes, walk through the project changes that are being proposed in our tip amendment number 3. Normally, we try to introduce tip amendments the month before. Unfortunately, due to the holidays, our TAC meeting was a week earlier in December. Had we been on our normal meeting schedule, we would have been prepared to present the project changes last month. So apologies that this is the first time we're walking through this together, but the tip amendment document was included in everyone's packet for review, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the project changes as we go through them. So just by way of introduction here, we amend our tip in coordination with our colleagues at New Hampshire DOT and the other MPOs in New Hampshire on a regular basis. This is the 3rd amendment of our fiscal 21 to 24 tip. It was released. We released it on January 10th, Monday, January 10th, for a 10-day comment period. That comment period runs through today. So we're holding a 10-day public comment period. The comments period ends today, and then the public hearing to consider adoption is scheduled for the January 25th MPO meeting, so next Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. So the project changes in tip amendment number 3 are starting with Hooksett. This is the widening of Route 3 from Route 27 to Alice Avenue. I am on the committee for this project, as is Bruce and others, and so there is an amendment to increase construction funding for the project in fiscal year 2024, and that is being done simply to match the current project estimate that's been programmed in the 10-year plan. So this is just bringing what's in the tip in alignment to what's in the proposed 10-year plan. In Londonderry, this is the Route 28 and 128 project. We are increasing the engineering phase funding in fiscal year 2023. In part, this is to reflect, again, this is to tie out to what's in the 2023 to 2032 10-year plan. If you recall, we increased funding significantly for this project to get it fully funded. And within the tip horizon, the engineering funding in 2023 was increased as part of that process. So we're reflecting that in this tip amendment. The next one is the first in a series of locally managed projects that are all kind of experiencing similar changes for similar reasons. So there'll be 4 or 5 of these over the coming slides. The first one is Londonderry's project, Londonderry's TAP project to finish essentially the rail trail north to the Manchester line. I will let Craig Tufts into the meeting. So this is the transportation alternatives project to finish the very northern section in Londonderry of the rail trail. This will move construction funding to start in fiscal year 24 rather than fiscal year 22. And the reason for this, and with all of these next 4 or 5 projects, is that the funding adjustment is for fiscal constraint purposes in the Transportation Alternatives Program and reflects the New Hampshire DOT's current understanding of project readiness. Because it's a locally managed project, and we have asked this same question of DOT publicly and privately, and have been assured both publicly and privately that if the community is ready to move forward to construction before that year, DOT will work with the sponsor, in this case, the town of Londonderry, to advance the project to construction when it is ready to move to construction. So they're making some adjustments here for fiscal constraint purposes, but there certainly is a desire to make sure that locally managed projects that are ready to go to construction can go to construction, and DOT has repeatedly expressed their willingness to work with communities to do that. The next one is in Manchester. This is the CMAC project for adaptive signal control on Granite Street and signal performance on South Willow Street. There are a couple of different adjustments here. The first is moving construction funding to start in 24 rather than 22 for all of the same reasons we just talked about with the Londonderry project. But there's a second addition here where they're actually adding highway safety improvement funding, so HSIP funding, to supplement the CMAC funding for the project. And that HSIP funding is going to be for the signal backplate component of the project. So there's kind of one additional change other than the fiscal constraint delay to 24. But again, when the city of Manchester is ready to move forward with the project, the DOT has confirmed that they will work when the project's ready to move to construction, it will move to construction. Same thing here with the CMAC project at the intersection of South Willow Street and Weston Road in Manchester. This is being moved to construction in 2025 rather than 2023 for fiscal constraint purposes. And again, same thing, when it's ready to go to construction, DOT will work with the city to do, if it's ready to go before 2025. Same thing for the locally managed CMAC project at the to convert the intersection of River Road and Bicentennial Drive to a roundabout. This is moving construction all the way out to 27 rather than 24. But again, if the city and their partner, the Dairyfield School, is ready to move forward with this project before that timeline, DOT will work with them accordingly. A significant addition of a new project in TIP Amendment 3. This is the RAISE grant project in the city of Manchester. So we are programming for the first time in the TIP the RAISE grant project, and that includes an extension of South Commercial Street, intersection improvements at Queen City Avenue and South Willow Street, an extension of Gas Street, conversion of the former Manchester Lawrence Railroad corridor to a multi-use path, and construction of a pedestrian bridge at Granite and Commercial Street. It is a $30 million project in total, 25 million of that being from the federal RAISE grant program. And within and all we have programmed here are simply the fiscal 21 to 24 years, because that's our current TIP window. So that funding is now reflected. We work closely with both New Hampshire DOT and the city of Manchester to program this project in TIP Amendment number 3. And we are excited that this project is in TIP Amendment number 3. The Nashua to Bedford project, this is the widening of the F.E. Everett Turnpike, the 2-lane sections of the F.E. Everett Turnpike between exit 8 and the I-293 interchange at Bedford. This is adding engineering phase funding in 2023, simply because New Hampshire DOT needs more engineering funding to get this project in final design. So this is a large and complex project. Additional engineering funding is needed, so that's being programmed here in 23. A few changes to statewide programs. This is the CRDR program, culvert replacement and rehabilitation and drainage repairs. So this is kind of the statewide culvert program. And there is a funding increase for right-of-way funding in fiscal 23, as well as construction funding in fiscal 23 and 24. Again, this is an overarching statewide program. It funds many different projects around the state. In our region, there is one project of note, and that is the rehabilitation of a 72-inch drainage pipe carrying Bowman Brook under Route 114 in Bedford. So we do have projects in our region, that being the most notable, that are funded in this program. But overall, due to the projects that are programmed in that particular program, additional funding is needed and being programmed in those years. The section 5307 Boston urbanized area funding. This is urban transit funding that is tied to the transit needs of the Boston urbanized area. There is an increase in funding for fiscal 22, 23, and 24. And the reason for that is that there's increased funding that has come in under that program under some of the COVID relief acts. And there's additionally, there are carryover funding from fiscal 21 into 22. So it is a significant increase in funding in that 5307 program, and that for the Boston urbanized area. And that is a direct result of the COVID relief legislation. MOBR, this is the municipal owned bridge and rehabilitation and replacement program. Many of you are familiar with the state aid bridge program that is state funded. There is a similar program for federal funding of off-system bridges that is called the MOBR program, and there are increasing funding in both engineering right-of-way and construction lines for that program in the fiscal 23 and 24 period. This is a statewide program, although it generally funds larger and more complex municipal bridges. In Manchester, the Salmon Street bridges are part of this program. And so based on the needs of that program in aggregate, additional funding is needed for all of the projects around the state. And so that funding is being programmed accordingly. There are two scope change. So nothing changing in terms of funding or timeline of these projects, only scope clarifications. The first one is a statewide CMAQ project. The approved scope as written is to evaluate 61 plus traffic control signals and develop and implement signal timings to improve traffic flow. And the proposed scope is a little bit more general, not tying it to a specific number of intersections per se, but simply to say evaluate signalized intersections and develop and implement signal timings to improve traffic flow. And the second one is it's a new standalone statewide project. It's a breakout of the complex bridge inspection program because I think there is non-participating funding from Maine in this particular breakout project. Yes. So this must be one of the bridges to Maine that Maine is contributing to the inspection of that bridge. Because Maine is contributing to the inspection of that bridge, the addition of that funding requires it to be broken out and separately than just the overarching program. So that is this project, and we're simply, the proposed scope is statewide complex bridge inspections child project for fiscal 17 to 21. That's it. I know I went through, we have a lot on the agenda today, so I'm trying to move fairly quickly, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any about any of these project changes. Hopefully that all makes sense. And if there are no questions, we would certainly welcome a recommendation to our MPO to adopt tip amendment number 3 at their hearing next Tuesday.
So moved. I will make that motion.
I'll second.
Anybody have any comments or questions or any discussion? Anyone in the room or anyone on Zoom? Okay, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any
Got a thumbs up
abstentions? I've
from
got a
Tim.
Thumbs up from Tim.
Linda, are you back with us? Thumbs up.
I am back, but because it's an amendment, I do not vote.
Right, okay, thank you. She abstains.
Abstentions, Linda. Okay,
Abstain.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Right, safety performance targets.
Yeehaw.
This is a fun discussion.
Yeah. Thank you, Colleen. Hi, everyone. This is Carl Eppich with the commission. Zach, Swick, and I are going to go over safety performance measures for 2022. This is something we do every year, or at least for the last few years. Bear with me now. I lost my cursor. Where did the cursor go? Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah, there it is.
You're on the bottom.
Yeah, why won't it show up when I go over? Huh,
Maybe close it, just start again.
this is very bizarre. I'm not sure. Yeah, I know, but I can't even. Let's see, save. Maybe once I save it, it'll let me. We're just having technical difficulties here, folks. Bear with us just a second.
So you first need to share.
Right, but
Just to open it first.
you need to open it first.
Oh, you don't have it open,
Well, I did, but okay, this is it.
sorry. Too many backseat drivers. You can do it.
I know you guys are all excited about this, so
It's a big old handle.
There you go.
See your cursor again.
there we go.
You're gonna have to.
Yeah, now I have to back out, okay. So now where's the,
Go ahead to Chrome.
okay,
It should be right there.
You want the blue icon at the bottom.
got it, all right, I'm good. Here, share screen. We're getting there, folks, here we go. That was weird, okay,
That's weird.
come on, okay.
Now
Can everybody see PM1 safety performance measures on the share? Someone give me a thumbs up.
I can't.
Okay.
We
great.
got a thumbs up.
All
Yeah.
right, okay. Sorry about that. So the FAST Act from quite a few years ago now requires DOTs, and it actually comes from an earlier legislation, requires DOTs and MPOs to annually measure and report on the performance of a number of category areas: safety, pavement and bridge, system performance, congestion, freight movement, and congestion mitigation and air quality. Today, we're really just talking about safety, however. There's a number of different targets and measures here. There are 5 to be specific, and they're all 5-year averages on the number of fatalities, the rate of fatalities, the number of serious injuries, the rate of serious injuries, and of course, don't leave out non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Again, they're all 5-year averages, and what we're going to do here is look at some data. Zach's going to come up behind me and take over to go through the data. But what the job is for us today is to look at the recommendations of staff. The state sets its own targets, and traditionally over the last 2-3 years, we have just adopted the state targets, but we do have the option as an MPO to support our own regional targets. So we have flexibility to do that. And so for 2022, unlike the last 2-3 years, we're actually recommending support the state targets for 2022. However, with the exception that SNHPC adopt a regional target for the fatality rate. And the reason we want to do that is that we've been doing better in the fatality rate than the state. And so it's logical for us to set a little bit better target. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Zach, and I'll be back after he goes through the data.
Okay, so so all the measures look at a 5-year average. So here we have the first measure, which is the total number of fatalities over 5 years. Over a 5-year average. And you can see that we've been pretty consistent and pretty flat, somewhere between 15 to 20 every year. And just for perspective, that costs, the total economic direct cost of that is about $30 million each year from those fatal crashes. And here's how we, so we have, these are the 5-year averages. Those are the red dots. then we have the trend line, and the X's are our previous targets, so the last 3 times we did this. And the orange would be the proposed target based on the state's target. So we'd be doing for these, when we have rates and numbers, we adopt the total state number. We don't actually adopt our own, but to give perspective, our number would be about 19 per year, would be our target. And this is what Carl was talking about. So we have here the fatality rate. So this is the total number of fatalities divided by 100 million vehicle miles traveled. So our rate is in the red. Our 5-year rate is in the red. The blue rate is the blue line is the state rate. And you can see that consistently, over the past now 10 years, we've been significantly lower than the state rate, somewhere around 0.2 percent, 0.2 lower. And that has to do with facts that we have a lot more vehicle miles traveled on limited access highways, which are in general much safer, have higher traffic than if you were in a rural area. You have regional routes, which are higher speed, but are not as geometrically safe, or might be farther from EMS. You have a higher rate. So just because we have a lot more highway than the rest of the state in general, we are consistently better. And you can see this here. We have our our 5-year average, our different targets, and you can see we've been 0.2 lower than the state for the last 3 years. And considering so that's why we're suggesting that we adopt a regional rate for this one. At this time, we're going to suggest 0.7 as opposed to the state rate, which is 0.874. And that's just because we're about that rate. It's a nice round number. Let's not try to be too we're not try to false precision here. So let's just pick a we're going to pick a number that seems to be reasonable, and is in turn is achievable based on our current rate. The third measure is the number of serious injuries. Our rate has been consistently falling over the last 10 years, as you can see, going from about 180 in 2011 to about 2020. To about 110 in 2020, and that reflects something that we see statewide, and we're not sure how much of that is real in terms of actual actual number reduction in serious injuries. Obviously, we assume some of them are, but there's also been issues with reporting and better reporting around serious injuries. So we're not sure how much that is real and how much of that is then going to continue. So here we have our 5-year rate. You can see the previous targets. So we actually didn't meet it in 2019. So we're projected to meet it in 2021, but we're still not sure. Because of this, we don't know how much of this reflects a real reduction versus just reduction in reporting. We're not sure. So we're going to keep with the state rate until we have a more concrete idea of where we're scoring on this. We see something similar for the serious injury rate, which is per 100 million VNT. And you can see that we parallel the state pretty closely, sometimes up, sometimes down a little bit, but in general, everybody's decreasing overall. And if that's real, that's very good news. And it looks very similar to the absolute number. Again, we're we're above in 2020, and 2021 we'll see. The final measure is the number of motorized fatalities and serious injuries combined. And you can see that we had a real bump there in about 2017. And actually what that is about a couple of years before that, 2013, 2014, I can't remember exactly. SNHPC had a really bad year where we had essentially double the number of serious injuries and fatalities that we typically do. And that's, it's worked its way into the system. And as you can see, it's now steadily declining as that year moves further and further out. And, you can see that, we're declining, we're on target to meet pretty closely the state target, which is good because, in general, our number of serious injuries serious injuries and fatalities are declining, which is good. And the states are in general as well. We'll see what happens over the next couple of years. For perspective, the US rate has been increasing significantly over the last 10 years, contrary to this. And our rate, the US rate is now about double what Canada is, and more than 2.5 times what the UK and Australia are for pedestrian fatalities per capita. So while we are improving, we're still much higher than the rest of the developed world, but we are going down compared to the state of the US as a whole. I believe you're back up, Carl.
So again, these are just some tables that show some comparisons over the last few time periods, the 5-year rolling averages. And what's important here is to look at the trends and then the target. The recent trend in the colored column under trends is the recent direction, and then our desired, of course, all these metrics is to decrease. What's going to be important here is this slide again, highlighting the second measure, fatality rate per 100 million BMT. Again, everything's desired. The trends and desired are both down. However, in the highlighted area on the far right column, you can see that our recommended target is different than the state with that 0.770. So this is kind of a summary slide. Just the state target, the SNHPC regional target, which in this case is a little bit different. The action that we'll take on is to support the state targets in all measures with the exception of the fatality rate. And what does this all mean for SNHPC? For 2022, we are again recommending to adopt the state New Hampshire safety performance targets with the exception of the regional target for fatality rate. And in supporting these state level targets and setting regional target, we will be agreeing to work with the state. This hasn't changed. Work with state and safety stakeholders to address areas of concern for fatalities of serious injuries within the SNHPC metropolitan planning area, coordinate with the state and include safety performance measures and HSIP targets for all public roads in the metropolitan area, and including in the SNHPC long range transportation plan, also known as the MTP. We'll be integrating the MTP process, the safety goals, objectives, performance measures, and targets described in other state safety transportation plans and processes such as applicable portions of the HSIP, including the strategic highway safety plan, which is ongoing right now. In setting a regional target for the fatality rate, we wanted to highlight this. The region has had a lower rate for 3 consecutive years, and staff believes that the region will continue to have lower fatality rate than the state. So we're going to be using this new target, or our own target, 0.7 deaths per 100 million VMT. And that's where we're trying to be. And I think I already covered all these. It's a little bit duplicative. And we'll just leave it at that. What questions you have? And I believe, Nate, that this is informational at this point, and we'll be taking this up again down the line.
Yeah, we just wanted to introduce this today. We're not asking the TAC to take any action or make a recommendation on this until next month, but we wanted to introduce it and give you all time to kind of digest the information and our recommendations, and let us know between now and the next meeting or at the next meeting if you have any questions about the data or the safety targets that are proposed. Otherwise, we will ask for on the February agenda, ask for a recommendation to the MPO to adopt those targets for fiscal 22. Our deadline to have the MPO adopt our annual targets is the end of February, so we're targeting doing that at the February MPO meeting. It's just we wanted to make sure we weren't asking, just kind of springing things on you and asking for a recommendation. So we're kind of introducing this in January, and then we'll give you all time to digest it, and we'll take it up for a formal recommendation in February and answer any questions you may have in the intro.
Any questions in the room or out in the world?
I have a quick one, Carl. This may be off the target
focus, but just also wondering if DOT and or our group are examining the locations of all of this and if there are any patterns to those locations.
I
I mean, I am.
Yeah, Zach, I was just gonna say Zach right
I'm
now.
just I play around with, as far as I know, there's no formal state or regional specification looking at anything. We have very good data at a municipal level. Once we get below that, it becomes much trickier.
I mean, I know we have our other safety programs. We have the road safety audit and such. We have intersection programs. I'm just wondering if the data might lead to some other planning effort aside from this target to be proactive about accidents, fatalities. I know, recently we had heard about some of the fatalities for, I think it was bikers in Manchester, and just wondering about the examination of the patterns and if there is, that kind of thing.
I mean, I'm digging into it, hopefully working with Carl to try to, figure out what are some different insights we can glean from this. And then, work with the towns, for example, looking at just regional data yesterday, I was able to finally see that, between 2002 and 2016, when they changed the database, vehicular people who were involved in crashes, 85% of them were buckled, but and then fatalities, only 25 were. So there's big discrepancies or disparities like that.
Right.
Or, I was just playing around with something this morning, and, the number of bike and pedestrian serious injuries and fatalities, I was playing around with those because in general, they're a much smaller number and easier to work with than crashes in general. There's a fairly strong correlation with poverty rate for municipality. You can actually say as poverty rate increases to a certain number, the rate will double. So there's stuff like that, but I don't know of anything right now where we have explicit program set up
Right.
for that.
Well, we know that for our road safety audit, we have that annually. In this last year in 2021, it came twice, once in October sort of time frame, and then the next one in June. And we had no one this last time come and participate. Maybe things are taken care of, but I
we
know
didn't-
Carl did a lot of outreach for that.
We didn't have any applications in the October for the December 1st deadline, but we had one for Manchester in June, which we conducted in October.
Yeah. Just
Part
like,
part of the issue is the GIS data has a lot of problems, so when you want to get down to a site-specific location, it becomes much trickier. We can say fairly confidently how many of this type of crashes occurred in this locality, that sort of thing. But a lot of times, the best, you don't have anything more precise than the road that it occurred on, and that can be an issue if it's on, South River Road in Bedford. Well, that's,
right.
it's a long stretch of road, that could be a bunch of different places. So there are issues like that. I'm working with it to try to get more specific and work with towns, but really what we need is better data from the state and the localities.
Lee's got his hand up. Lee?
Yeah, hi, thanks. Yeah, I was just thinking, nationally, we hear a lot about the pandemic period and VMT decreasing, speeds increasing. And I wondered if you guys, as you're looking at the data, is that being reflected regionally? And, has that had any impact on, the target setting process for safety measures?
I didn't see any. I was expecting probably to see that for this year, but I didn't really see anything in our region or state. I don't know if that's just because in general it was small enough that it doesn't sway the 5-year average. It'd have to be a fairly significant, increase in that case. And I just didn't see it for us. Maybe if you were, someplace that had a significant fall off, like if we were the greater, whatever the RPC that services Boston or New York City or something like that, where you saw a real drop in commuters, maybe we could have pulled something like that, but for us, not anything real conclusive, which I would have expected actually.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. Maybe that'll, like you said, it might show up later on as part of the 5-year trend data. I don't know.
Question?
Yeah, you used a financial number of $30 million impact. I was just wondering how that was calculated.
So it was either last year or the year before. The National Safety Council, is that correct? That's it's a nonprofit. They created a methodology looking at the number of fatalities, and in part because there's a separate statistic you'll sometimes see, a value of statistical life, which is a much more complicated economic measure, whereas this is just, how many, how much did it, in general, how much on average did, the crash cost, loss in wages, that sort of thing, where we can directly pull that out. And they have a measure when they, it's a fairly simple formula. You go and how many fatalities do you have on average that created this particular cost. So we can actually get a number.
Does that include like EMS response?
That includes just about everything that has a direct, where you can attach a dollar measure to it fairly easily. Some of the stuff that, there are other measures where, you can say, how much would a person be willing to pay to not get in an accident? That's a much more complicated analysis that most of us really don't have a good, understanding of if you're not an insurance salesman. So that's pretty direct, that like that costs the region in money that we can count about 30 million a year in fatal crashes.
Did the Safety Council formula take into account like population densities?
No, that was just a general state. So I'm assuming, if you have it in New York City versus, rural Idaho, I'm assuming there's going to be a difference. So take that as with a grain of salt, and just as a general measure of general size. It's in the tens of millions.
I have one question too. Just I forget, but I think at the state level there's some flex in spending if targets are met. Is there any implication in terms of safety targets for our region? Does it impact our programmatic layout at all?
No, the state, if the state does not meet its targets, loses the ability to do discretionary transfers of HSIP funding. In other words, they lose the ability to take their HSIP funding and use it for other purposes. They have to spend their HSIP funding on safety projects. That's the quote unquote penalty at the state level. We in the state have never transferred our HSIP funding that I'm aware of to any other purpose other than HSIP. So yes, at a state level, that's the quote unquote penalty. There are no quote unquote penalties at the MPO level.
And I want to say in the last year, New Hampshire did not meet its safety targets, along with a fair number of states. But for us, like Nate said, for us, there's not really any penalty.
And Lee, if there's anything you want to add to that, feel free from a federal perspective, but that's my understanding. And to Zach's point, yes, there was a finding that New Hampshire did not make significant progress in meeting in meeting the safety targets in the last analysis period. And as a result of that, the state, there's a requirement for the state to do like a corrective action plan of some sort, or and describing in detail to the federal government how they're going to deploy HSIP funding. So that is one of the other requirements.
Yeah, I think that's all correct, Nate. Everything that you have said. And so as you mentioned, New Hampshire really hasn't exercised the flexibility to transfer those funds anyway. So really kind of status quo as far as the HSIP program is concerned.
Any other questions? Okay, not, we'll move on.
Thank you.
James, public participation survey. Thanks, Barb.
Can the people online see the screen? Should say Southern 2021 SNHPC Public Participation Survey Report.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Over the last several months, SNHPC has talked a little bit about, I've come before the TAC and the MPO at different times of the last 6 months to talk about public participation, either reporting out on metrics for how we're doing in terms of participation, or more recently about conducting a survey, which took place to gather feedback on people's knowledge of SNHPC, our outreach activities, and their preferences for being engaged in transportation planning. So back in early November through mid-December, we conducted a survey, and that survey had a response rate of 120 people. And today I would like to talk about the findings of that survey, briefly a little bit about the methodology, and a quick conclusion of the survey results. And then this survey will be posted on our website and will become part of the materials we use to maintain a baseline understanding of our performance in conducting public outreach. So this survey methodology, and maybe I'll slide this down here. This is an opinion style format. It had two primary sampling groups, one in which it probably included yourselves. Some of you might have completed this survey, as well as other MPO stakeholders, commissioners, other people that attend the meetings or participate in MPO planning process. And the second group was a general audience of the SNHPC region. We use targeted social media posts to reach a geographic area that encompassed our region. And we also use direct email and direct communication like these meetings to reach out to the MPO stakeholders.
James, you can make the gallery small. There you go.
So I will not, I'll try to just go through these in summary and not go through each one of these in detail. If people want the specifics of this data, I can either print you a report and have it dropped off at your office. I have one here that you can take with you if somebody's particularly interested, but we'll also have a PDF with of this report on our webpage, and I can share it with you that way. But there's about 15 questions with a couple of demographic questions at the end. So I'll just kind of go through and summarize what the findings were here. In general here, with this first question, we asked how familiar people were with the Planning Commission, and it's about half of the respondents were familiar with the Planning Commission. And as we'll see in some of these other questions, that's a pretty close reflection of the breakdown of the sampling group. So about half the sampling group were MPO stakeholders, and the other half was the general audience. And so then you can see to the right-hand side of this pie chart is this pie donut. This donut chart is there's varying levels of familiarity that range from, you know, I'm somewhat familiar. I've heard the name before, and I've never heard of Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission before. Again, half and half breakdown. So there's about half of the group had never been involved in an SNHPC meeting or commented on an SNHPC authored plan before, while the remaining half of the group has had some level of involvement, ranging from highly involved to participating in at least one meeting or planning document. This next question was to help us categorize participants or respondents by a variety of elements. So the first, people could pick all that applied here. The first one is, do you live in the region? And about 80% of people that responded to the survey lived in the region. The next one is, do you work in the region? About a third worked in the region. 16% were commissioners. 16% collaborate with SNHPC on behalf of a municipality. 6% were part of this TAC committee, and then 4% were participating or involved in none of the other categories. This next question, or question 4, asked what type of things presented a barrier to participation, and about a third of respondents stated that there were no barriers that they experienced. This is an assumption on my part, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that a good chunk of that is probably MPO stakeholders, people who regularly participate and find that the methods that we use to engage people work for them. The next largest group, about a quarter of the respondents, don't know how to participate in meetings and events and provide comments on plans. And this also kind of makes sense because we reached out via social media to a general audience, some of which had never heard the name Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission before. So this, this question really asks questions that are reflective of the type of respondent that we received. And so we can filter and break this down by question 3. So if we went back to, or sorry, question 3. If we went back to this one, said, do you live, work here? Are you none of these things? Are you a commissioner? Are you a TAC member? Like if we start filtering out commissioners, TAC members, or municipal and people involved through municipalities, we could take another look at this number, get different results. Question 5, rank your preference. So people took like slider bars and stacked them one on top of each other, ranging from 1 to whatever this is, 6 or 7 here. And what we saw is that in general, there was a pretty even spread in preference and how people wanted to be engaged, and with direct email kind of leading the pack. So between our direct emails and our quarterly newsletters, those were the highest preference outreach methods, but not by a very wide margin. This, on the other hand, which media platforms do you use regularly? There was a clear winner in that Facebook saw 86% of respondents use Facebook regularly. In all fairness, we used Facebook to conduct the outreach, so this is kind of a natural response that you would get. This isn't a scientific survey by any means, or an academic style survey by any means. And so, if we were trying to get something that we could hold up with a margin of error, we'd have to use a more rigorous sampling method. But for what we're trying to do, which is gather, a general understanding of how we're doing as an RPC, or an MPO, this worked well. And so you can kind of take this with a grain of salt, but in general, Facebook was a highly favorable method for outreach. So have you ever participated in an SNHPC hosted meeting or event or webinar? And so there was a nice spread here of a variety of different meeting types, although I'll note that, again, going back to the fact that this went out to the general audience, none of the above was the highest response, with about 30 of the respondents, or nearly 40% of response rate But some of the high hitting ones are ones that are obvious to this group, the policy committee meetings, the TAC meetings. But some of these other ones, maybe not core to our MPO responsibilities, but things that the SNHPC does, transit-oriented development outreach, age-friendly outreach, the scenic byway and bike to work days, all had a decent number of people who have responded to those. So some of the ancillary programming that we do turns out to be a good method for engaging the general audience and in our planning work.
James, can I ask a question? Does that number seem high to you? I just look at the skip 45. Was that the only one that jumped out that seems higher compared to the others? Up at the top left, we have answered and then, oh, okay.
Yeah, so they do kind of drop off. Quite a few people started skipping questions. I could go back to the beginning, but about 73 of the respondents completed the survey, and out of the 120. So we lost about a third of the people who, maybe got 2 or 3 questions and said, man, this isn't, this is not what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
They just didn't finish the survey.
Okay.
So moving on from this one, what changes, if any? So this is an open-ended question, which we then coded and sort of identified people into buckets of interest. And what we heard about people relative to improving the meeting experience, people wanted to see more outreach content. They liked that the meetings were held online or made available online, and they want to see that maintained. We saw several instances where people asked that plain language be used in our notices so that they could have a clear understanding of what it is we'll be talking about. Like, admittedly, that's kind of a tall order sometimes, given the nuance of what we do. And then post the info in more locations. And so, these are sort of the top responses we saw from the open-ended question. And quite a few people skipped that one. That was 81 skipped that. This next one is, have you ever provided comments on a SNHPC produced or authored document? And so here the big winner was the Southern Central New Hampshire Regional Trails Plan, which I guess is not a surprise. I mean, we know that trail planning in our region is highly popular and a highly competitive element of what we do in transportation planning, and so that's kind of reflected in the survey as well. The MTP and the TIP and the transit oriented development plan that was done for Manchester were all and then the scenic byway plan really were all pretty high up. So there's a lot of comment and engagement amongst the respondents for those plans. Some of the lesser commented ones were our ITS architecture, our UPWP document that we publish, and the prospectus. Which are not very exciting to the general audience. So it's understandable.
Well, when you look at those, the ones on the top are things that we've most recently done. We had just finished the regional trails plan. We've done a whole lot of outreach this past year, so that's not surprising.
I'd also make the comment that for the trails plan, that's the sort of thing where you would expect a lot more comments, because that's trail data in general and existing uses on that are really hard for us to know specifics sometimes. Whereas we might know exactly where this road is, we have good data on that, but a certain trail, whether it's gravel or paved or whatever, it might have just been changed, we don't know. And the local person is they're the people that actually know the trail conditions, and they're gonna be able to comment on, this isn't correct, you need to change this. That's where it's really essential.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'll try to accelerate through the rest of these last 5 questions here. How would you rate SNHPC's performance in informing people of opportunities to participate in transportation planning? And so what we saw here in general is that respondents thought SNHPC was doing a good job providing information. So if you took sort of good and you combine it with excellent and fair, you'd see that that makes up a pretty significant chunk of the respondent group. If you compared that to poor, where you combined very poor and fair, it's a pretty significant margin. So this is good news. For the people who understood what we were doing to inform people, they felt like we were doing a good job with it. Here, this is a preference for method for giving feedback. Kind of like the Facebook question, right? Where we're asking people on Facebook what their preferred social media platform is. Here, we're asking people on an online survey to tell us what the preferred method for giving feedback is. And the number one answer is online surveys. So, but you can see the spread here is fairly even. You know, people like to have a variety of options. That's kind of reflected in the data. So people like meetings, community events, virtual events, written comments, all had you know, enough comments to warrant those outreach approaches.
James, that was, they could select one or they could click every one.
I think this one was all that applied. Then we followed this up with an open-ended question about how we can improve our feedback process. And what we heard was similar to our improving meetings. People want to see plain language when we talk about what we're doing with transportation planning. There was a surprising number of responses that said partner with other organizations to get your word out, have a booth at another organization's event to make sure that your message is being heard across different interest groups. Use simple polling instead of long form surveys. So more than a couple people said, you know, have a 1 or 2 question poll out on social media or other platforms and collect data that way. Post in more locations showed up again. And then a number of people commented that they would like to see some of the transportation planning content that's produced from SNHPC presented at their town hall meetings. And that was, that's not one that I've heard before, but internally we've talked about how we could implement something like that, you know, share information with town clerks and elected officials about what we're doing and ask them if there's topics that they would like us to come present on. This is a very simple yes/no question. Would you consider informing others of upcoming meeting events for certain topics? You know, this is not the full question. It was, you know, would you consider informing others of upcoming Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission events for certain topics? And 3/4 of people said yes. And so this was designed for the next question, which was open-ended as well. You know, what are those topics that you would be willing to share with your peers and colleagues that would be important enough that you would share that information with others for the upcoming meeting? And so the most frequent one, and this is a reflection of the fact that this is a general population that's also made up half of the respondents, introduction to what SNHPC does for work. Right? Most, you know, half of the group, you know, has little interaction with us and doesn't necessarily know what we do, while the other half is pretty well versed. Trails and bike infrastructure, complete streets, transit-oriented development, climate and equity issues were brought up several times, and then regional local coordination. So the responses on some of these were hard to categorize into one group. You know, some people were very interested in solving community issues at a community scale, and other people were interested in solving regional issues at a regional scale. And so I kind of clumped those together, but nonetheless, they were there and I included them in the summary. Do you currently receive our newsletter? This is kind of a little bit of a, it's kind of a little bit of a pitch to sign up for our newsletter. So, you know, if not, you know, there was another page that said, well, here's a link to go sign up for our newsletter. So And I think, Linda's not in the room, but Linda could, I think, vouch that we did get several people that signed up for the newsletter as a result of the survey. So it had the sort of educational effect that we were hoping it would have with the general audience. I won't get into this in too much detail other than to say we collected demographic data across age, race, income, and gender. We did have a representation, a relatively equal to the general population representation of income, race, and gender and age. Well, age is actually a point of, I'll get into that. So this one actually was not a good representation. What we found here is that the survey response was heavily tilted towards older individuals. Nearly 65% of people who responded to the survey were over the age of 55. And so it would be worth considering alternative sampling methods for collecting input from younger adults. I don't know what that looks like, other than to say, we noticed that young people, young adults, people over the age of 18 are not engaged with us. I don't know how we solve that problem, but it's certainly something we'll be looking at.
Well, I think as you age, you understand like 55 is really the new 35. Right, Nancy?
Right.
And so final slide here, survey findings in short. Affirmation from the general public and our MPO stakeholders that our outreach strategy is successful and is what they want to see. Our outreach activities are well matched to the preferences of the respondents in terms of how what channels we use to reach out. We're doing a good job of informing the public. At least that's what they're telling us in the survey response. And the last one, challenges in reaching younger adults to engage in the planning process. So I don't know if there's any other questions people have. Otherwise, I'm done.
Thank you, James.
So in the room, do you have any questions for James? All right. Other business, the annual list of obligated projects.
Okay.
Jason. Yeah, we're gonna get all the, actually, we're gonna get all the 18-year-olds at Vayo.
Kids love the A-Law.
Who doesn't love it? It's not here. All right.
Weird.
There's a lot of PowerPoints up there.
Hey,
All right, there we
there you
go.
go.
Well, you've all been very patient, and can everybody see this annual list of obligated projects PowerPoint
Yes.
online? Okay, great. This is a brief PowerPoint. It's 75 slides. I'm just going to go quickly through it about each of the projects. No, I'm kidding. We just put this under other business just to let you know that we have published in December, we published our annual list of obligated projects. This is a federal requirement. And even though this image shows last year's list of annual obligated projects cover page, I can assure you that the fiscal 21 was posted in December, and I should have updated this particular image. But just as a reminder, we are required as an MPO to develop a listing of projects, including investments in pedestrian walkways and bicycle transportation facilities, for which funds under Title 23 or 49 were obligated in the preceding program year. So fiscal 21 in this context is the federal fiscal year, October 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2021. And you can find the report. You can go right to the front page of the SNHPC website. If you go down to news and notices, you can find the annual list of obligated projects, and it is a list of obligated projects. So there are 79 projects on the list that had funding obligations or had funding obligated during fiscal year 21. That 11 local projects in 7 communities in the region, 16 regional projects, and 52 statewide projects. Total funding obligations in the region totaled just over $116 million, and that was $400,000 different than the previous year. So pretty much level, essentially, with this should say fiscal 20, actually. So I must have done this PowerPoint quickly for some reason. Two typos here, but so yes, in fiscal 21, just a hair over $116 million in total funding obligations, just about level with last year. The key projects in the list this year that had significant funding obligations, and let's see if I can, I think there's a way to hide this little hide floating meeting controls. There we go. The Exit 4A project had $9.6 million of funding obligations. The Route 101 bridge over Pulpit Brook in Bedford had $5.6 million of funding obligations. There was a pavement preservation project on Route 111 and Route 28 in Derry, Londonderry, and Windham that had $5.6 million. There were $5 million in transit-related COVID relief funding that were obligated primarily for MTA and CARTS purposes. And let's see. We also break out the list of obligated projects by category, just kind of an overarching category of projects. So total highway and bridge obligations, 83.9 million. So just over 72% of total obligations were for highway and bridge projects. Debt service obligations, primarily related to the I-93 expansion, were just over 10% of total obligations. Transit project obligations, $10.48 million, and that's about 9% of total obligations. Bicycle and pedestrian project obligations, 1.385 million. I will note that what we call bicycle pedestrian projects for the purpose of this report is something that is exclusively a standalone bicycle and pedestrian project. We are not breaking out in this report if a bridge replacement included also the installation of a sidewalk next to that bridge. Is that a bicycle and pedestrian investment? Yes, but we're not going into that level of detail here to break out individual components of projects. We're really what's in that category are rec trails and TAP projects primarily. The total planning project obligations, 7.5 million. There were some UPWP obligations statewide from the last contract cycle that were in there, as well as the current contract cycle, as well as we categorized one particular project, which is a statewide ortho imagery data collection project, as a planning level project. So, and then there's also research projects that New Hampshire DOT administers on a statewide basis, which had just about 0.7% of the overall obligations. So different kind of pavement treatment research and lots of different projects in that research category. That's it. We just put this as a brief update under other business. I didn't want to go into kind of excruciating detail about the individual projects. If you are interested in the list of the annual list of obligated projects, then like I say, it is posted on our website. It's been up there since December. You can still access it right from the news and notices section on the front page of the website. And I don't know if anybody has typically reads the annual list of obligated projects, but if you do read it and you have any questions, please let us know. And with that, I will yield the floor back.
Thank you. And then finally, it looks like we have a winter bike to work day.
Yes, I'm gonna. So our newest staff, Tammy Zamoyski, she brought a crazy idea with her. many of you have heard about the penguin plunge, right? Well, Tammy, tell them all about this idea. Up, we can't hear you. What is that? We fixed that before. You can always come in the room.
She's off mute.
She's off mute.
Oh, she might be on.
Up, she's coming. Is she coming? All right. Hang on, you're gonna wanna hear about this. Yeah, we know that May is the bike to work month, sort of, and there's always that bike to work week, but Tammy had brought with her a new concept that rivals the penguin plunge.
Okay,
Try using
Yeah,
Chrome, because you were in
You were in, yeah.
Explorer.
Oh, boy. So close yet so far.
okay, well, we're. Sorry for the technical difficulties. So Winter Bike to Work Day is Friday, February 11th. And when I reached out to some of our project partners, everybody was really excited, but their first question was, why on earth did you choose the historical worst date for weather in New Hampshire? So the simple answer is, I did not choose the date. February 11th is International Winter Bike to Work Day. So people all over the world will be celebrating, and I had a bunch of really fun pictures of people in Canada and Germany and Finland. But you get the idea. So this year we're hosting different stations to encourage people to bike to work and also to create that sense of community. So we have a breakfast station hosted by Manchester Moves at the Piscataqua River Bridge, just up the road here. And the Grind Rail Trail Cafe and Dairy is also hosting breakfast. So they're encouraging people to come by and get grab and go items or to work remotely from the Grind, and then they'll get a discount on breakfast. We'll also have an afternoon station for people who maybe work second shift or to accommodate those 9 to 5 workers who are heading home. So that'll be at the Queen City Bike Collective from 4 to 6 p.m. They will have hot cider and donuts. So that's kind of fun. And then a lot of times we hear that some of the barriers for people to biking to work is they just live too far away, which I know is particularly relevant for a lot of people in our office. So we've worked with our different communities to identify 2 different parking lots that people can drive to, unload their bike, and then bike the last mile or 2 or however many they feel comfortable to work. So we have one in Derry at the Abbott Court lot and one here in Manchester at the Westside Ice Arena. What else can I say? Obviously, this is a really fun event for cyclists, but we also have economic development opportunities. We're fostering relationships with all of our partner organizations, which is great. We're obviously encouraging physical and mental and social health, which we could probably all use a little bit more of these days. And it's just a fun, safe way to get everybody out. I know that winter bike commuting isn't for everybody, so we will have opportunities in the future for Bike to School Day, which is in May. Bike to Work Week is also in May, and then Walk to Work or Walk to School Day is in October. So we hope that you can participate in one of those events. If you have any questions or comments or ideas for this event or ones in the summer, you can let me know. I've also printed out some posters and left them at the front door if you would like to grab some and hang them up in your break room or in your office and encourage people to participate.
Question for you.
Yes.
Are there some resources you can post to help people have a successful, positive experience from riding out in the cold for the first time?
Of course. So on our Facebook event page, I have 2 links to some pretty fun YouTube videos. One is showing you how to dress for work, and the other one is showing you some tips for winter commuting. So bike handling, how to maintain your bike, things like that.
Oh, great. Any other questions? or-
Awesome,
Sounds
wonderful,
great.
thank you.
All right. I don't know if anyone has anything else, otherwise I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Adjournment?
Hi. Thanks, everybody, thank you. Everyone online.